My name is Jordan. I'm 36 years old, and I live in a quiet town called Marlow in northern Kentucky. I work as a warehouse supervisor in a distribution center just outside of town, and for the most part, life had settled into a routine. But all that stability unraveled the day my girlfriend, Tanya, and her two closest friends thought they could teach me a lesson. What started as a weekend escape turned into a cruel wake-up call I never asked for. I didn't understand the full weight of what was happening until I found myself alone, abandoned, and completely stripped of everything I thought I could depend on. It was supposed to be a 4-day cabin retreat in Tennessee. Tanya had planned the whole thing as a way to reconnect and recharge. Her words, not mine. We'd been together for nearly 4 years, and while we weren't perfect, I thought we were solid. She was funny, ambitious, and always had something planned. But she also had this habit of laughing off my discomfort, especially around her two best friends, Marcy and Alyssa. They worked together in a local real estate office and were glued at the hip, always gossiping, joking, and tagging Tanya in everything. And when I say joking, I mean at my expense. I tolerated it because I loved Tanya. I figured everyone has quirks. I'd hear the snide remarks about how I dressed or how I always asked for directions when driving. They'd toss glances at each other, smirk behind wine glasses, whisper and giggle like high schoolers. Tanya never defended me, not once. She'd just shrug it off and say, "They're just playing, babe. Don't be so serious." But this time, their version of just playing crossed a line I never knew existed. We'd been at the cabin 2 days. It was remote, cozy, perched near a river with a wraparound porch. Tanya, Marcy, Alyssa, and I had made the drive in her SUV. I drove most of the way while they blared music, snapped selfies, and laughed at TikToks. I didn't mind. I was just happy Tanya wanted me there. Or so I thought. That Sunday morning, we stopped at a country-style diner in a sleepy little town not far from the cabin. I got up to use the restroom after breakfast. I told Tanya I'd be quick. When I walked back out into the bright morning light, I felt it immediately. Something was off. The parking lot was nearly empty. Their SUV, the one I had driven in, was gone. At first I thought maybe they moved the car playing some silly joke. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, heart thudding, scanning the lot. But they were gone. My phone? It had been charging in the car. My wallet? Left on the passenger seat when I went to wash up. All I had were the clothes on my back, a faded blue hoodie, jeans, and the old sneakers I'd worn out of habit. No keys, no ID, no cash. Just the empty lot, a flutter of wind, and a diner hostess asking me if I was okay. I wasn't. Not even close. I walked back into the diner, asked to use the landline. The woman behind the counter, probably in her late 50s, handed me a cordless phone with the kind of suspicious kindness you give someone who looks like they're about to fall apart. I dialed Tanya's number. It rang 5 times, then voicemail. I tried again. Straight to voicemail this time. I left a message, something like, "Call me back. This isn't funny." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't coming back. Not anytime soon. I sat in the booth for almost an hour, just staring out the window like a ghost. My thoughts ran in circles. Maybe Tanya was mad about the argument we'd had the night before. I'd made a joke about how loud Marcy snored and she didn't like it. Maybe they wanted to scare me. Maybe they thought I'd laugh it off. But as the hours stretched on, I realized it wasn't about jokes anymore. This was a message. A brutal, immature message that said, "You don't matter." Eventually, a guy in a rusted blue pickup, an older man with sun-spotted skin and a calm drawl, sat across from me in the diner. He'd seen me pacing outside. "You stuck or something?" he asked. I didn't want to spill everything to a stranger, but the words came out anyway. He didn't judge, just finished his eggs and said, "I'm headed north, passing through Louisville. I can drop you at a bus station or somewhere with cell service." I nodded. It was the best offer I had. During the ride, I stared out the window, watching the green hills roll by and the clouds stretch across the sky like they had no agenda. Meanwhile, mine was in shambles. I kept hearing Tanya's voice in my head, that fake sweet tone she used when she was trying to smooth things over. I imagined what she might say if I called her. "It was just a prank, babe. You're being dramatic." I didn't want to hear it. Not anymore. We pulled up at a small town called Glendale, where the man, his name was Curtis, dropped me off near a community center. He offered me a 20 from his glove box. I refused at first, but he insisted. "You're gonna need something. he said. "Take care of yourself, son." I thanked him, and just like that, he drove off. The community center staff pointed me to a local outreach shelter that helped stranded travelers and folks down on their luck. It wasn't glamorous. A cot in a shared room, soup and bread for dinner, but it was more than I had just 24 hours earlier. That night, I lay in bed surrounded by snores and coughs, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow above me. I replayed the last few days in my head over and over. How Tanya laughed when Alyssa accidentally spilled her drink on me. How Marcy kept mocking the way I said pecan like I was some hillbilly. All those small humiliations I let slide. I should have known this was coming. I just didn't want to believe the woman I loved would ever treat me like that. But now, as the fan blades spun and the shelter's light flickered in the hallway, something settled inside me. A truth I'd buried under too many second chances. Tanya didn't love me. Not really. She loved the convenience, the image, the laughs at my expense. And now that I was out of sight, I was out of mind. But maybe that was a blessing in disguise. The next morning, I woke up sore from the cot, my back stiff and my mouth dry. The shelter was already buzzing with motion. Guys lining up for coffee, staff checking the board for daily jobs, someone coughing loudly from across the room. I rubbed my eyes and sat up slowly, my head still swimming with everything that had happened the day before. It was strange. Part of me expected to feel rage or panic, maybe even heartbreak, but what I felt most was emptiness, like something had been cut loose, and all that remained was space. After a thin cup of coffee and a slice of toast, one of the volunteers, a no-nonsense woman named Denise, pulled me aside. She was probably in her late 40s, wore her hair in a short ponytail, and had the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You got any ID?" she asked. I shook my head. "Phone?" Another shake. She sighed. Not annoyed, just efficient. "All right, we've got a protocol for this. Takes time, but we'll help you get your documents back. In the meantime, you want to eat? You work?" I nodded. I wasn't afraid of work. I'd worked my whole life. Warehouse shifts, landscaping in the summer, hauling scrap metal with my uncle when I was just 14. What scared me wasn't labor. It was starting over. The idea of rebuilding from zero, in a town I didn't know, with no one I trusted. Denise pointed me toward a church downtown that needed help cleaning out their community hall. I walked the 20 minutes in the chilly morning air, my hands shoved in my hoodie pocket, passing rusted fences, shuttered stores, and houses that looked like they hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in years. Glendale wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, honest, no pretenses. At the church, I met Pastor Bill, a short, round man with a beard like Santa Claus and a handshake like a vice. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a mop and said, "Let's get this floor shining." For the next 4 hours, I swept, scrubbed, and hauled chairs until my arms ached. When I finished, he gave me a paper sack with a sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. "You're welcome back anytime," he said. And he meant it. That sack lunch was the best thing I'd eaten in 2 days. I sat on the church steps, chewing slowly, watching a stray dog sniff around a trash can. My phone would have normally been in my hand and checking emails, scrolling through Tanya's Instagram, looking at stuff I didn't need. Now all I had was this moment. Silence. The wind. The bite of real hunger being satisfied. Later that afternoon, I headed back to the shelter. Denise gave me a form to start applying for a new ID. "You'll need an address," she said. "Use ours for now." Her efficiency was a comfort. No pity, no babying, just clear steps. For once, someone wasn't making me feel small. That night, lying in the cot again, I thought about calling Tanya. I imagined the conversation, her voice fake gentle, trying to spin things. "We waited for you, Jordan. We were just messing around. You know how the girls are." I could almost hear Marcy laughing in the background, Alyssa rolling her eyes, Tanya begging me to lighten up. But for the first time, I didn't want that conversation. Not because I was afraid of what I'd hear, but because I already knew it all. Word for word, like a script I'd memorized. There was no point in hitting replay. The next few days were slow but steady. I worked odd jobs through the shelter's network, cleaned out a garage for an old widow named Ethel, painted a fence for a local teacher, even helped fix a sink at a barber shop. Every task ended with a few bucks, a sandwich, or at least a thank you. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And it was mine. Then came the diner. Denise told me about a place called Rosie's Grill, a greasy spoon just off Main Street with a help wanted sign taped to the window. I walked in, heart pounding a little, and was met by the owner, Rosie herself. She was a tall woman in her late 50s, wore a red bandana around her head, and had a voice like gravel and maple syrup. She sized me up like a drill sergeant. "You ever wash dishes?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, though it had been years. She nodded. "You steal, lie, or show up late, you're out. I pay cash every Friday. Sound good?" I nodded. She tossed me an apron. "Start now." And that was that. The kitchen was hot, loud, and fast-paced. The steam never stopped. My hands were raw from the soap and hot water within hours. But I kept my head down and worked. Rosie didn't praise much, but when I wiped the sweat from my brow and kept up during the lunch rush, she gave me a slight nod. That was enough. I fell into a rhythm. Shelter at night, diner by day. I stopped checking the shelter phone for messages. I didn't ask Denise if Tanya had called. I didn't care anymore. Every plate I scrubbed felt like I was washing her memory off me, layer by layer. The grief didn't vanish, but it dulled. Like an old bruise you stop pressing on. Rosie started leaving me little things. An extra pancake after breakfast rush, a Coke from the back fridge, a pack of bandages for my cracked knuckles. She didn't say much, but those gestures, they mattered more than any apology Tanya could have ever fake whispered. After 2 weeks, I bought a prepaid phone with the cash I'd saved in an envelope under my cot. It wasn't much, just a flip phone with basic service. But it was mine, paid with my own sweat. No shared data plan, no texts from the girls. Freedom, one small beep at a time. That same night I got my first message. It was her. Tanya's name lit up the screen, and I just stared at it. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She left a voicemail. "Jordan, please, and call me. This got way out of hand. We're all worried sick. It was a stupid joke. Please, let's talk." I didn't listen to the rest. I erased it. She called again the next morning. This time I turned the phone off. I kept the phone off for 3 days. Not because I was afraid of what she'd say. I already knew. It was the same manipulation wrapped in concern. The same tone she used when she wanted to smooth over a fight. Make everything my fault in a way that sounded like love. I knew if I let her talk, she'd twist it. Make it seem like I overreacted. That it was all a misunderstanding. That they were just trying to be funny. But it wasn't funny. It was cruel. And no voicemail, no apology, no teary speech would make it anything else. Instead of chasing that ghost, I chased shifts. Rosie was short on help and I started picking up extra hours. Mornings, nights, anything she had. I was saving every dollar. Not because I had some grand plan, but because for the first time in years, I had something that was mine. I wasn't sleeping in my girlfriend's apartment, driving her car, living in her social circle. I was scrubbing dishes in a hot kitchen, sleeping in a crowded shelter, and I'd never felt more like myself. One Friday afternoon, Rosie tossed a folded piece of paper at me while I was wiping down the prep counter. "What's this?" I asked, drying my hands. "Studio apartment above Sal's laundromat," she said, without looking up from the register. "Guy who used to rent it skipped out. It's tiny and smells like detergent, but it's yours if you want it. Month to month. Cheap." My chest tightened. A place of my own. A door I could lock. No curfew. No snoring from the next cot over. I didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stared at the paper like it was a ticket to something bigger than a room. I had just enough saved for a deposit and 1 month's rent. "I'll take it," I said. The following week I moved in. The studio was nothing special. 1 room. Cracked linoleum floors. A mattress that looked like it had been rescued from a yard sale. A kitchenette the size of a closet, but it was mine. I stood in the middle of that tiny space the first night, breathing it in like fresh air. No Tanya, no Marcy or Alyssa, no empty laughter meant to humiliate, just the hum of washing machines from below and the quiet creak of old pipes. I bought a second-hand lamp from a thrift store and a couple of canned meals. The first thing I set on the counter was a cheap mug from Rosie's Diner that said, "Don't talk to me till coffee." It felt like a symbol, something I'd earned. I turned my phone back on that night just to see. 32 missed calls, 17 voicemails, dozens of texts from Tanya, her friends, even her brother, who I'd barely spoken to in years. The messages started out sweet. "Please call me. I'm so sorry. We messed up." Then they turned angry. "So you're ghosting now? Grow up, Jordan." This is pathetic. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. Instead, I went to work. I scrubbed plates, peeled potatoes, learned to flip pancakes on the griddle when Rosie was in a pinch. One night I even stayed past midnight to help clean the grease trap, because she didn't want to do it alone. She didn't thank me, just handed me a cold root beer and muttered, "You're all right, kid." That was her version of love, I think. Around that time, someone new started showing up at the diner. She was maybe a few years younger than me. Brown hair tied up in a messy bun, glasses sliding down her nose, always hunched over a thick binder of textbooks. She came in every Tuesday and Thursday, sat in the corner booth by the window and ordered the same thing. Veggie omelet, no mushrooms, black coffee. She didn't talk much, barely looked up, but I noticed her. The way she chewed on her pen cap when she was thinking. The way her foot bounced under the table when she was frustrated. She had a quiet focus, a kind of energy that made the noise of the diner seem far away. I started messing with my name tag just to see if she'd notice. One day I wore a tag that said Frank. Next time it was Duke, then Larry. She never blinked, until I wore Maverick. She looked up, raised one eyebrow and said, "You're not a fighter pilot." I laughed. First time I'd laughed like that in months. "You got me," I said. "I'm Jordan." She smiled, small but real. "Sienna." That was it. A moment. But it stuck. Over the next few weeks I found myself looking forward to her visits. I'd refill her coffee before she asked, bring her a muffin on the house. One night she looked up from her notes, rubbed her eyes and sighed. "Med school is hell," she mumbled. I blinked. "You're in med school?" She nodded. "Final year. Practicing for boards. I've got 4 different diagnoses swimming in my brain right now and none of them are mine." I smiled. "Sounds like you need more caffeine." She laughed softly and for the first time I saw a crack in her armor. Not weakness, just humanity. The next week she didn't show up. I tried not to notice, but I did. The diner felt louder, emptier. 2 days later, she was back. "Got stuck in the hospital," she said when I brought her omelet. "Everything all right?" She nodded. "Yeah, just tired and hungry." So I added an extra side of hash browns, and she didn't argue. That night when my shift ended, she was still there, her head resting on her arms, the binder open in front of her like it was whispering secrets. I hesitated, then walked over. "You ever take a break?" She looked up, smiled. "Not often." "You should," I said. "There's a park 3 blocks from here. I walk through it after work. Clears the head." She looked at me, considering. "Maybe next time," she said. And something about that, the maybe, was enough. I didn't expect maybe next time to actually turn into something. People say that all the time, in passing as a polite deflection. But the following Thursday, Sienna showed up at the diner not with her usual books, but in jeans and a navy jacket, hands tucked into her pockets, eyes darting toward the door as if she were waiting on someone. I was on my break, sitting outside on the little concrete step by the employee entrance, sipping from a paper cup of too strong coffee. She found me there. "So," she said, approaching with a half smile, "that park you mentioned, you still walk it?" I blinked, almost spilling my drink. "Yeah, every shift. Just helps me breathe, you know?" She nodded, pulling her jacket tighter. "Mind if I come?" We walked in silence for a bit. The park wasn't anything grand, just a trail that looped around a duck pond, a few benches, and an old wooden gazebo where teenagers carved initials into the beams. The air smelled like pine and distant barbecue smoke. The wind tugged at her hair as she walked beside me, hands still buried in her jacket. Neither of us felt like talking much at first, but it wasn't awkward, just quiet, peaceful. Eventually she spoke. "You don't talk about yourself much." I chuckled. "Not much to say." "I doubt that." We paused at the pond, watching a couple ducks glide across the murky water. She sat on the bench and looked up at me. "I'm guessing you didn't always live above a laundromat and work in a diner," she said. I sat down beside her, the bench creaking under our weight. "You'd guess right." And just like that I told her. Not everything. Not all the details. But enough. About how I'd been left behind. How Tanya and her friends thought it'd be hilarious to dump me at a diner in the middle of nowhere. How I'd walked into a shelter with nothing. How I'd scrubbed dishes until my hands cracked just to feel like I was standing on my own 2 feet again. Sienna didn't gasp or overreact. She didn't pity me. She just sat there listening. Really listening. With her chin resting on her hand and her eyes soft but steady. "Sounds like you've been through hell." she said. Yeah, I replied, voice low. But I'm still here. And that was the first time I truly believed it. From then on, things changed. Subtly, quietly. Sienna started showing up more often, not just for study sessions, but for conversation. She'd linger longer, asking about my day, rolling her eyes at customers who left no tip, telling me about her hospital rotations and how med school was slowly grinding her down. We started sharing more than small talk. Music, jokes, pieces of our pasts we hadn't dusted off in years. Our first actual date wasn't planned. One rainy Friday, her friends bailed on a dinner reservation, and she showed up at the diner just before closing with an umbrella in one hand and a hopeful grin. Still hungry? She asked. Rosie was wiping down the counter. She didn't even look up. Go, she grunted. You're no use to me tonight. So we went. Not to some fancy restaurant, but to a pizza joint tucked behind a strip mall. We split a large with pepperoni and mushrooms, drank too much soda, and laughed so hard the waitress raised an eyebrow at us. It felt normal, real, like something good in a sea of chaos. Back at my apartment, we sat on the floor, legs crossed, her textbook open between us and her socked feet resting lightly against mine. I don't get how you can still laugh like that, she said. After everything. I shrugged. Because I'm not stuck there anymore. Sienna started coming over more after that. At first it was just for coffee or study breaks, but then she'd leave her charger behind, or a hoodie, or a travel mug with her initials on it. Slowly, her things started mixing with mine. Her laughter filled the apartment the way silence used to. Her hairbands ended up on my nightstand. Her smell lingered on the pillow beside mine. We didn't talk about what we were. We didn't need to. It was simple. It was safe. It was new. And just when I thought I'd buried the past, it found a way to dig itself back up. It started with an email. I was slicing onions in the back of the diner when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally, I ignored it during shifts, but something made me check. The subject line read, "Just checking in, Tanya." I froze. The body of the message was short, almost innocent. "Hey, I hope you're okay. I've been thinking about you. We all have. Please write back. I miss you." I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. My hands trembled slightly. The sharp bite of the onion faded into the background. I wasn't expecting it. I thought she'd given up after the voicemails. But there she was, slipping through the cracks of my new life. I didn't reply. But more came. 2 days later, another message. Then another. They got longer. More dramatic. Please mixed with guilt trips. I know we hurt you. I was stupid. But we had fun, didn't we? Remember our beach trip? The dog you wanted to adopt? I still have the photo. I saw your cousin at the grocery store. She said you moved. Please just let me know you're okay. Jordan, I can't sleep. I replay it in my head all the time. I'm so sorry. Each time I deleted them. And each time it stung just a little less. Sienna caught me staring at my screen one night, jaw tight, phone glowing in the dark. Someone from before? She asked. Yeah, I admitted. The one who left me. Sienna didn't ask questions. She just moved closer, wrapping her arms around my shoulder and resting her chin there. You don't owe anyone anything, she whispered. And somehow, that single sentence silenced Tanya more effectively than any angry reply ever could. After that night, I decided once and for all, no more looking back. I blocked Tanya's email address just like I had blocked her number months before. It felt final, clean, like cutting a frayed rope before it could drag you back into the current. The ache was still there, sure. Memories don't vanish overnight. But it no longer controlled me. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never be enough, or a confession that would never fix what had been broken. I was free in a way I hadn't even realized I needed. Life with Sienna settled into a rhythm. Mornings were hectic, her alarm blaring at 6 a.m., the smell of burnt toast from my terrible cooking attempts, her muttering medical terms under her breath while brushing her teeth. Evenings were quieter. Shared dinners at the diner after my shifts, her stretched out on the futon with her textbooks, while I balanced the cash register in the back room. Sometimes we said a lot. Sometimes we barely spoke. But there was an ease to it, a comfort. Rosie noticed the change in me, too. One evening, after the dinner rush had died down and the regulars were lingering over their coffee, she leaned across the counter, studying me with that sharp gaze of hers. "You're different lately," she said, almost accusing. I shrugged, wiping down a tray of silverware. "Just Good different, I guess. She grunted. Good. Means you're not carrying dead weight anymore. That was Rosie's way of offering a blessing. Winter settled in hard that year. Glendale got more snow than usual, and the sidewalks turned into icy traps. Business slowed down, and there were days when the diner barely made enough to cover expenses. I picked up extra shifts, cleared snow from the sidewalk before opening, even learned to fix the ancient coffee machine when it sputtered out during the morning rush. One afternoon, after closing early due to a blizzard, Sienna and I bundled up and walked through the deserted streets, the whole town muffled under a thick blanket of white. She threw a snowball at me, laughing as it exploded against my jacket. I chased her down Main Street, both of us slipping and sliding like little kids. For a moment, we forgot about bills, exams, work, everything. At the edge of the park, breathless and red-faced, she turned to me and said, "I don't think I've ever been this happy." Neither had I. I wanted to bottle that moment, keep it tucked in my pocket for the harder days I knew would come. Because life wasn't perfect. We still struggled. Some nights Sienna came home so exhausted she could barely stand. Some mornings I wondered if working in a greasy diner was all I'd ever be. But it didn't feel hopeless anymore. It felt like something we could build on together. Around March, things started shifting again. Rosie pulled me aside one morning, handing me a set of keys. "Kitchen manager's quitting. Said he's sick of fighting the fryer. You want the job?" I stared at her, stunned. "You serious?" "Dead serious. Pays more, hours suck. But you're the only one I trust not to burn the place down." It wasn't a glamorous offer, but it was a step up, a vote of confidence. Proof that someone saw value in me, not as a joke, not as a placeholder, but as someone worth investing in. I took the keys. The promotion meant longer shifts and more responsibility. Inventory orders, staff schedules, dealing with health inspectors. It was stressful, but the good kind, the kind that came with knowing I was moving forward, not just treading water. Meanwhile, Sienna was nearing her graduation. She started talking about residency programs, about possibly moving to another city if she got placed somewhere out of state. The thought scared me. Losing her. Starting over yet again. But I didn't tell her that. She deserved to chase her dreams without my fear holding her back. One night, as she sat cross-legged on the futon filling out applications, she looked up at me with those steady brown eyes. "Would you come with me?" she asked. I blinked, caught off guard. "You'd want me to?" She laughed softly. "Jordan, you're part of my life. I don't want to leave you behind." No one had ever said that to me before. Not like that. Not without strings or guilt or games. I nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, I'd go anywhere with you." We didn't make big declarations, no teary speeches, just a quiet agreement, spoken in the language we'd built between us. Around that time, Tanya tried one more time to worm her way back in. A handwritten letter this time. No return address, just my name scrawled across the envelope in looping, familiar handwriting. It showed up tucked between a gas bill and a coupon flyer, like some ugly memory jammed into a pile of mundane life. I opened it. The letter was long, full of regrets and half apologies. She said she missed me, that she thought about me every day, that she'd made a terrible mistake. She wrote about the good times we had, like polishing old memories to make them shine again. She said she wished she could go back and fix everything, that she wanted me to give her one more chance. I read the whole thing, twice. Then I folded it neatly, walked down the stairs to the dumpster behind the laundromat, and tossed it in. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't hurt at all, because by then, I wasn't the man she had abandoned at that dusty diner. I wasn't the joke, the afterthought, the fallback. I was Jordan, a man who had clawed his way back from nothing, built a life from the scraps they left behind, found someone who saw him, valued him, loved him. I went back upstairs, pulled Sienna close, and kissed the top of her head. "You okay?" she murmured against my chest. "Yeah," I whispered. "I'm good." And I was. Better than good. I was finally free. Spring arrived like a slow, careful breath. The snow melted away, revealing patches of muddy grass and cracked sidewalks. At Rosie's, the diner filled up again. Farmers coming in from the fields, teachers grading papers over coffee, families piling into booths after Sunday services. Life had a hum to it, a steady rhythm that made every long day worth it. I didn't need excitement or drama anymore, just the quiet satisfaction of a life that belonged to me. Sienna matched that rhythm perfectly. She still had brutal study sessions that left her falling asleep mid-sentence. and I still had nights where the fryer clogged, and I stayed late scrubbing grease off the walls. But in the middle of all that exhaustion, we carved out little spaces for ourselves. Picnics at the park with sandwiches from the diner. Movie nights in our tiny apartment, our legs tangled together under a fraying blanket. Life wasn't easy, but it was ours. One Friday night after work, Sienna met me outside Rosie's, bouncing on the balls of her feet like she was holding back a secret. "What's up?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. She grinned, holding up a thick envelope. "I matched," she said, voice trembling with excitement. "I got the residency." I didn't even have to ask where. I could see it in her eyes. She was terrified and thrilled all at once. I pulled her into a hug so tight she squeaked. "Where?" I finally asked, pulling back to look at her. "Cedarville Hospital," she said, 2 towns over. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. 2 towns, not 2 states, not across the country, just a 30-minute drive from where we were. Close enough that the life we'd built wouldn't have to be packed into boxes and thrown onto a moving truck. Close enough that we could still be us. "I'm so proud of you," I said, meaning every word. The next few weeks flew by in a blur. Sienna wrapped up her classes and started prepping for residency life. I worked extra shifts, squirreling away every dollar so we could afford a slightly bigger place. Something with a real kitchen and maybe a bedroom door that actually closed. Rosie naturally found out we were moving. I didn't even have to tell her. She just cornered me one morning by the walk-in freezer. "Heard you're skipping town," she said gruffly. "Not far," I promised. "I'll still visit." She handed me a battered coffee mug, a twin to the one she'd given me months ago, this one reading, "World's Okayest Cook." "Take it," she said, "and don't screw it up." I laughed, my chest tight with gratitude. Rosie wasn't much for speeches, but that mug meant more than she'd ever admit. Our new apartment wasn't fancy. A 1-bedroom over a bakery that opened at 5 a.m. and made the whole building smell like fresh bread. The floors creaked, and the water heater made a sound like it was dying a slow death every morning. But it had windows that caught the afternoon sun, a tiny balcony just big enough for 2 chairs, and walls we could finally hang pictures on. We built a life there piece by piece. Sienna thrived in her residency, even when the hours were brutal and the patients heartbreaking. Some nights she'd come home and cry into my chest, too exhausted to form words. Other nights she'd burst through the door, face glowing, telling me about a surgery she assisted on or a patient she'd helped walk again. I listened to all of it, every high and every low, and felt honored to be the one she chose to come home to. As for me, I found a new job in Cedarville, managing the kitchen of a small cafe run by a retired couple who treated me like family. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, honest work. Work that didn't leave me questioning my worth at the end of the day. One evening, about 6 months after we moved, I found Sienna sitting on the floor of our living room, sorting through a box of old photos she hadn't unpacked yet. She held one up, laughing. It was me, standing outside Rosie's, holding a tray of burnt toast with the most ridiculous grin on my face. Someone, probably one of the waitresses, had snapped it without me noticing. "You look so different," Sienna said, turning the photo toward me. "Older?" I teased. "No," she said softly. "Stronger." I sat down beside her, taking the photo. She was right. I wasn't the same man who had stared helplessly at an empty parking lot all those months ago, heartbreaking in the Colorado sun. I was someone new, someone rebuilt from the ground up. We stayed like that for a while, flipping through memories old and new, laughing, crying a little, grateful for every step that had led us to that cluttered living room, with its second-hand couch and smell of fresh bread wafting up from the bakery below. Later that night, as we lay tangled together under a pile of mismatched blankets, Sienna traced lazy circles on my chest with her finger. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked, voice so soft I almost didn't catch it. I didn't have to ask who she meant. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not because I miss her, just because she's part of how I got here, part of what made me realize what I deserved." Sienna kissed my shoulder, her breath warm against my skin. "You deserved better all along," she whispered. I smiled into the darkness. "Yeah," I said, "and I finally got it. The past still existed, sure, buried deep under layers of new memories, new love, new hope, but it no longer had the power to pull me under. It was just a story now. One I survived, one that taught me how to fight for myself, how to believe that even after everything crumbles, you can still build something beautiful from the ashes. And that's exactly what we were doing. one day at a time, together. Summer in Cedarville brought a warmth that had little to do with the sun. Life had finally found its rhythm, not just routine, but meaning. I'd wake up to the smell of coffee from the bakery downstairs, and sometimes Sienna would already be gone, off to the hospital before the sky was fully light. Other mornings, she'd be curled next to me, her body wrapped around mine like the world outside didn't exist. Those were the mornings I savored most. The quiet, the stillness, the reminder that the chaos I'd come from was no longer my present. We weren't rich, not even close. Rent still took a big chunk of our paychecks. We still argued about groceries and forgot to do laundry until the last minute. But everything we had, we built ourselves. There was pride in that, even on the hard days. At the cafe, things were steady. The couple who owned it, Thomas and Brenda, were kind in a way that felt genuine, not forced. Thomas reminded me of an old mechanic I used to know, gruff, blunt, but with a heart buried under all that sarcasm. Brenda was the opposite, bubbly, always smiling, always calling me hon. They treated me like I was one of their own. When their daughter came home from college one weekend and brought her friends to the cafe, Thomas introduced me like I was part of the family. "That's Jordan," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Keeps this place running. Don't let the tired eyes fool you, kid's sharper than he looks." It was small, but it meant everything. I wasn't invisible anymore, not the guy in the background, not the tag-along boyfriend trying to survive a weekend with women who saw me as a punchline. I had earned my place, in this town, in this life. One weekend, Sienna had a rare day off and suggested we take a day trip. Nothing big. Just the two of us driving out toward the hills past the old state park. We packed peanut butter sandwiches, water bottles, and a cheap instant camera she insisted on bringing. As we walked through the woods, the heat clinging to our skin, I watched her snapping pictures of wildflowers and trying to identify birds she'd only seen in textbooks. She was glowing, not just from the sun, but from the life she was finally getting to live. She wasn't just surviving school anymore. She was becoming something. And in turn, so was I. At one point, we stopped to rest on a flat rock overlooking a quiet stream. She leaned her head against my shoulder and sighed. "You know," she said, "I used to think healing had to be some big dramatic thing, like one moment where everything changes and you feel fixed." "Yeah?" I asked, brushing a leaf off her arm. "But it's not," she said. "It's this. It's you making coffee while I tie my shoes. It's us folding laundry at midnight. It's showing up. Every day." I didn't respond. I just kissed the side of her head and let the words sink into my bones. Later, we found a tiny general store near the edge of town that sold the best peach cobbler I'd ever tasted. The woman behind the counter looked like she'd been baking since before microwaves existed, and when Sienna complimented her pie, she beamed and said, "You two look happy." And we were. But happiness, like anything real, came with shadows. One of those shadows returned just when I thought I'd locked the door behind it for good. I was cleaning up the kitchen after a long day when Brenda called out, "Jordan, you got a visitor." That was strange. No one visited me at work. Not even Sienna. She was always too swamped at the hospital. I wiped my hands and stepped into the front of the cafe, heart already tight. She was standing by the window. Tanya. Her hair was shorter, dyed lighter. She looked tired in a way that makeup couldn't hide. When she saw me, her lips twitched into a familiar half-smile. "Hey," she said. I froze. Everything in my body screamed to walk away, to not give her the satisfaction. But I didn't move. I didn't run either. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "I was passing through," she said. "Saw the name of the cafe in a local blog and, I don't know. I guess I hoped it was you." I said nothing. She took a slow step closer, her voice softer now. I wanted to see if you were okay." I stared at her. Not with anger, not with longing, just clarity. "I'm more than okay," I said. She flinched at that, like she wasn't expecting it, like she was still hoping I might be broken. "I've changed," she said quickly. "I'm not the same person. What happened back then, that wasn't fair. To you. I was stupid." "Yes," I replied. "You were." The silence between us stretched. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she added, eyes darting to the cafe counter. I wanted you to know that I regret it." "I don't," I said, and meant it. Tanya looked confused. "You leaving me there?" I said. That moment, it gave me the life I have now, the love, the job, The peace. So no, I don't regret what you did, because you set me free. Her eyes welled up, and for a second I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just nodded. Well, she said, voice trembling, I'm glad you're okay. I'm more than okay, I repeated. She turned and walked out, didn't look back. I watched her disappear down the street, the doorbell jingling behind her like a period on the end of a long, exhausting sentence. When I walked back into the kitchen, Thomas was standing there with his arms crossed. That the ex? Yeah, I said. He nodded. Want me to spit in her pie next time? I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the tray I was holding. That night, I told Sienna everything. Not because I had to, but because I wanted her to know. She didn't get mad. She didn't get weird. She just listened and held me. And that was more than enough. I'm glad she saw you, she whispered. I'm glad she saw what she lost. She didn't lose me, I said, kissing her forehead. She never had me. Not really. Fall crept into Cedarville with golden leaves and crisp mornings that made the whole town smell like apples and chimney smoke. Life had become steady in the best way, predictable, but never boring. I'd walk to work in the early light, hands in my jacket pockets, nodding to familiar faces along the sidewalk. Sienna was thriving in her residency, gaining the respect of senior doctors and interns alike. She came home every night bone-tired but fulfilled. And I was finally living a life that felt mine, fully, deeply, honestly mine. The encounter with Tanya faded quickly. It was like a gust of wind that slammed the door one final time. There were no more letters, no more emails, no awkward run-ins or late-night regret texts. She was a shadow, a ghost from a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't need closure. I already had it, in the shape of a one-bedroom apartment with steamed-up windows from the soup simmering on our stove, in the warmth of Sienna's voice whispering medical jargon in her sleep, in the laughter we shared over burnt cookies and old sitcom reruns. One Sunday morning, Sienna dragged me out of bed before sunrise. Come on, she said, already dressed in one of my oversized hoodies. I have a surprise. I groaned, pulling the blanket tighter. Do I need shoes for this surprise? Yes, she laughed. And pants. Reluctantly, I got dressed and followed her out into the chilly dawn. We drove for about 20 minutes to the outskirts of town, where the trees opened up to a ridge overlooking the valley. She pulled a thermos and 2 mugs from the trunk, then sat cross-legged on a blanket she'd spread over the damp grass. What are we doing here? I asked, sipping the coffee she poured. Watching the sun come up, she said simply. It's a new season. Felt right. We sat there side by side in silence, watching the sky shift from deep blue to orange to gold. The town below looked tiny, like a model train set. I felt her hand slide into mine and squeeze gently. Do you ever think, she began slowly, about what would have happened if they hadn't left you that day? All the time, I admitted. And I shrugged. I'd probably still be stuck, still waiting for someone to love me the way I needed to be loved, still mistaking pain for passion. She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. I'm glad they did. I'm glad they were stupid enough to let you go. Me too. That sunrise marked something for me, a turning point I hadn't expected. Not a dramatic one, but a quiet internal peace. I had spent so long defining myself by what I'd lost, by how badly I'd been treated, by what others thought I was worth. But now I could see myself clearly, not through the eyes of my past, but through the life I'd built despite it. Back in town, I started teaching the younger cafe workers how to manage the kitchen. Thomas had hinted at stepping back, maybe even selling the place in a few years. Brenda joked that I should take it over, that I already ran the place better than Thomas ever did. I laughed it off, but the seed was planted. Maybe one day. Sienna and I started saving more intentionally. A real emergency fund. Talk of a second-hand car that didn't rattle when it hit 40. She started leaving her medical journals open to articles about family medicine and rural practice. I noticed, but didn't push. We even adopted a dog from a local shelter. A mutt with floppy ears and too much energy who we named Pickle. That dog tore through shoes like a wood chipper but curled up between us every night like he'd been there forever. One night, while Sienna studied on the couch, I looked around the apartment. At the chipped mug on the table, the dog toys scattered on the floor, the framed photo of us from the peach cobbler day, her laugh frozen in time. I thought about who I used to be, the man staring at an empty parking lot wondering what he did wrong. And then I looked at who I was now, I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Tanya, not at her friends, not even at myself. I was proud of the way I had fought back, not with fists or rage, but with discipline, with kindness, with work, with love. I'd taken what they thought would break me, and I'd used it to build the best life I'd ever had. And you know what? I hope they tell the story sometimes. I hope they laugh about it over drinks and say, "Remember when we ditched Jordan? Man, that was wild." Because I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because of how wrong they were. They thought they'd left me behind, but really they pushed me forward. If you've made it this far into the story, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was a story about healing, about discovering your worth when others try to erase it, and about how sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing that ever happened for you. I'd love to hear your stories. Have you ever been in a situation where someone left you behind only for you to come out stronger on the other side? Let's talk about it in the comments. Not just to share pain, but to celebrate growth. We're building a community here, and your story matters. If this video touched you in any way, consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to support us, but to make sure you don't miss the next powerful story that might just speak to your journey. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, and most importantly, remember, you are not what they did to you. You are what you do next. See you in the next one.